kick in here and hit the logout button. Perfect. If this does not work, make sure to restart the application. Sometimes when you implement things with cookies and HTTP context, you might have to restart the application. So let me show that again. We signed in here. It is working. When we hit log out, we have login and register. Our application is looking good right now, but let me try one thing. Let me try to log in using our API here. Try that out. We will get back a token. Let me copy that token. And we will go to jwt.io. Let me examine that. Here we have quite a few things, but we do not have a role of the logged in user. That is very critical when you are working with authorization. In order to add that, we will first have to add that at the API level inside the auth API. Let me close all the tabs and open the auth service. Here, when we are assigning the role, we are passing the role name. But when we are generating the token, in the token generator, we are not passing role of the user. Now, right now, our user only has one role, but it is possible that a user can have multiple roles. Because of that, we will add an IEnumerable for roles. Let me continue editing, and I will open the implementation. Where is that? Right here. We will get an IEnumerable of roles. When we get that, we have the claim list here. So on the claim list, we can add range. What we want to add is roles.select, and we will use projection. Role goes to new claim type, and then rather than using the JWT registered claim names, we will be using the .NET type, which is claim types.role. That will make sure that when in the project we are accessing role or we are checking if user has a role, it will automatically do that mapping. So on claim type of role, that is the key name, value will be the individual role. Let me add the semicolon, and that looks good. Now when we are calling the token generator, we have to pass the role that is inside auth service. Where is that? Right here. We need to get all the roles of the user. For that, we have a helper method. Let me call variable roles. Await on user manager, we have a helper method get roles async, and we need to pass the application user. It will retrieve us all the roles, and we simply have to pass that to our token generator. With that configured, let me restart the application and see if that works. We are in the auth API. Let me try login again. Execute that and copy the token. Let me examine that. Perfect. You can see role of admin is added in our token, and that is great. Now our token has a role, but when we are decoding that token in the web project, we need to extract that role and assign that in the web project. We will do that in the auth controller right here, and we want to extract one more claim. Let me copy this, and that is of type claim types.role. And here what will be the type that we saw? It was a string with the value of role. With that configured, let me add a breakpoint here, save that, and try that out. Well, let me restart the application to be sure, because I'm changing few things in the token. Let me log in as admin here. We hit our breakpoint. Let me examine the identity, claims inside there. And perfect, you can see the claim of a role has been configured. Now the reason I am using claimType.role here is because with the .NET integration, if you have added the claim type of a role, then let's say in one of the controller, if you add here the authorize attribute and you say role is equal to st.admin, this is automatically taken care of because that claim is assigned when you are signing in the user inside the HTTP context .sign in async. And because of that, it is critical to add that line. Now let me do one more thing here. Let me switch back to the application and let me sign in. Well, we will have to continue, of course. Perfect. When a user is signed in here, I want to display email. That is pretty simple. Let me go to the layout here and let me add one more li element here. We do not want any link here, so href, we can keep that as empty. But rather than log out here, we want to say hello and then the email. If we examine the user, it has identity, not identities. Identity dot we have the name, and if you examine the claims when we were populating that, we added email address there. With that line, if we go back, perfect. You can see helloadmin@gmail.com, and that is looking great. If a user is logged in, we will see that. If they are not, we have login and register. Before we continue here, let me add some validation on the required fields in register and login. I will go back and we will have to go to models. We have the login request DTO and registration request DTO. We will add required properties there. Email, name, phone number, and password are required. Correct that. And with the login, both username and password is required. With that, let me restart the application and see if we have the validation. I do not believe I added them, but let me go back and let me open the view for login and register. We added the ASP validation for, but we forgot to add the script. So let me do that here. In login as well, let me add that script here. And let me go back, try register, perfect, login, great. You can work on designing that. I am going to keep things super simple. Now let me try to register a same user. When we try that, nothing happens. So basically it is going, but it is not creating that. Let me see if I am displaying error message. If the is success is false here, in the else part, let me display temp data of error. And we will display the result.message in toaster of error. Save that here, and perfect. Now we can see the validation. If the password is secure enough, let me see what happened. Perfect. The username is already taken. Let me try to log in here. That does not work. For anything invalid, we have the validation, but we can move that to toaster as well. If I go back to login here, let me get the individual validation for username and password. Remove the validation summary from here, and where we have the auth controller, copy this, and in the login, paste it right here. Want to return back to the view with the obj, leave that here, and this will be response DTO.message, and rebuild the application. Let me try login. We have the validation. If something is not valid, perfect, we get the error message. Now our validations with login and registration are working as expected. Let me show you something odd. Let me close the application. Where we have the coupon API, let me open that here. We have the coupon API controller right here. Let me add an authorized keyword. That way only authorized user can access coupon. If I run the application again and try to access coupon after signing in, we will see a different error message. Let me sign in first. And now if I click on coupon, you will see internal server error. Why do we see internal server error and not the error message with authentication? Well, the reason is simple. When we take a look at our coupon API, let me close everything else here. We are working on coupon API for this video. In the program.cs, we have not defined that authentication will be handled by this API. Right here, we will have to say app.useAuthentication, and again that will be before authorization. Now when we are authenticating, we are validating three things. If you recall, we have the secret, we have the issuer, and we have the audience. We will have to validate our token using all three of them. So if we go to the API project, let me copy the settings here. I can remove the JWT option. I want to use the simple route here. Let me paste it and remove the JWT option. Directly in app settings, we will have secret, issuer, and audience. We will have to add authentication in program.cs. Where we have the builder.services. First, let me retrieve the secret. That will be using builder.configuration.getValue. We will define the type here. And then we need the section name, API settings, paste that here. And the key name is secret. Add a colon and paste that. That will retrieve the secret. Similarly, we will get the issuer and the audience. Then if you remember the secret, we were encoding that by ASCII2. So we will add that code here. And finally on builder.services, we will add authentication and we will configure some options there. We will define what is the authentication scheme and the default challenge scheme. Both of them will be bearer and it is a constant with the bearer value. Then we have to configure the JWT bearer token. Let me do that here. And when we are validating the token, what are the validation parameters? So x.token validation parameters, and we have to create the object and define what exactly we want to validate. Let me add the using statement here. Perfect. And first thing we want to validate is the issuer signing key. Set that to be true. We have to define what is the signing key here, and that will be new symmetric security key. We will pass the key right here. Next, we want to validate the issuer as well. Set that to be true here. And we have to define what is a valid issuer. That we have in the variable. Similarly, we will say valid audience and validate audience will be true. You can define way more parameters if you want, but these basic parameters are looking good for our authentication. On top of that, we also want to add authorization in our API. So let me add that. With that, we have added authentication in our API. If you run the application, now you will not see the internal server error message anymore. Let me show that. We go back here, try coupon, and perfect. Now we see a valid error which says unauthorized. Before we work on accessing coupon from our web project, let me go to the API project that we have, Coupon API, and here if we try to access coupon, it will not work. We get a 401 not authorized. How can we add authorization or authentication using Swagger that we have in the API? For that we have to configure the Swagger gen and add some configuration right there. Let me go back to the program.cs of the Coupon API, and we are adding the Swagger gen right here. There we have to configure few options, goes to, and first we have to define option.add security definition. We are using bearer here, so we will say name is bearer, and we have to define the security scheme, which is a new Open API security scheme. Add the using statement. In there we have to define few things like name, authorization, description. You can write anything you want. I have added something meaningful here. And what is the location for the bearer token? We have written that it will be inside header and scheme is bearer. This is the default setting, so do not panic on what we are writing here. Think of it as something that is needed by default when you are adding authentication to your Swagger documentation. Finally, on option, you will also have to add the security requirement, and that is OpenAPI security requirement object. We need to configure that as well. Now that will expect a new OpenAPI security scheme, and inside there we have to give a reference. Now again, do not panic on why we are writing such ugly code. What is all of this complexity? It is one of the basic things that is needed to enable authentication in Swagger gen documentation. This will be new OpenAPI reference here, and we have to define two things. Type will be reference type, dot security scheme, and what will be the ID? That will be bearer. Rather than having magic string as bearer here, we have that right here. So copy and paste that here, as well as right here, it will be bearer. Along with the OpenAPI security scheme, we have to give a list of values. We don't want anything here. Let me pass an empty string there. With that ugly configuration that we have, Swagger gen is configured. Let me restart the application, and now you will see a lock icon next to the API, and perfect. Now how do you authorize this token? If we go back, whatever we wrote here, it is basically adding that in the description, and we have to give the bearer token. To get that token, we will have to go to the auth API, and let me log in here as admin@gmail.com. Get that token here. Copy that, go back here. When we paste it, you can see I entered in the description. You have to write bearer, leave a space, and then the token. We will write bearer here, paste that token, and authorize. Perfect. With that, if you try to execute, we see an error message where it says bearer error invalid token. Error description, the audience is invalid. Why is that? Let me see. Let me go back, and where we are validating things, we have audience. That looks good here. Let me add a debugger and rerun the application. I want to see all the value, and of course, you can see we are getting the secret but not the issuer and audience. I believe the reason behind that is first we will have to get the section and then all the values. So I will say settings, section is equal to builder.configuration.getSection. we want to get the complete section of API settings here. And once we get that, on this section settings, we want to get the value. Here we will only pass the value, save that, and let me restart. We are getting all of them here. That looks good. I need to validate everything again. Let me log in first. Get the token from there. Add that to our coupon API. Authorize. And let me try the get here. Perfect. So you can see if audience or anything is not valid, the token is considered invalid and API does not return back the result. Now we want to switch back to the main application, and there when we are trying to access coupon, if a user is logged in, we want to access all the coupon. Right now we get unauthorized, and that is because when we are calling the API, we are not passing the JWT token that we saw when we were calling the coupon API. We added the bearer token. We already have that token in the cookies. If we examine, we have the JWT token. So when we are actually making the API call in our base service, we have to pass that token to our API. For that, we have to modify the base service. Let me close all the tabs here. Open the web project. We have the base service and the interface. Right here, let me add a boolean. I will call that with bearer, and default value will be true. Let me add that in the base service as well. With bearer will be true. And right here, if with bearer is enabled, then we want to set our token. To get the token here, we have the token service, which is token provider. Let me inject that here. We will have a private read-only iToken provider. iToken provider here. And perfect, that looks good. We can retrieve the token here using underscore token provider dot get token. Then on the message dot headers, we have to add an authorization header. If you make any spelling mistake in the authorization here, things will not work. And when we add the bearer token, we need the bearer keyword. So again, do not make any spelling mistake here. I just did that. There we go, we have bearer. And then we will leave a space, add the token. Perfect. With that configured, let me run the application. Let me go to the web project here. We will log in. Try to access coupon, and great. If you log out and try to access, it displays unauthorized. With that, we are successfully passing the token. What will happen is by default, we are setting that to be true. But we do not have to pass token when a user is registering or they are logging in. We can go to the auth service here and we can override that with token with bearer will be false here. Copy that. Well, when they are assigning the role, let me pass that. But when they are logging in, let me remove that for now. We save that, and if we go back, let me try to log in here. Everything should work exactly the same. Before I wrap up the video, I want to clean something up in the coupon API. Let me go there. Minimize this. Coupon API program.cs. You can see it is getting too clustered here. This authentication code that we have here, let me move that to a different file, and that way the program.cs will not be too cluttered. I have to create a new folder. Let me stop the application. In Coupon API, we will create a folder for extensions. Inside there, let me create a new class file with the name of Web Application Builder Extensions, and there we will basically be extending the Web Application Builder. For that, we will have public static Web Application Builder, and let me call that add app authentication. When you are adding an extension method, static keyword is required, and this keyword is required before the Web Application Builder. What we can do is program.cs. Let me cut everything that we selected and paste it right here. We have the builder object, and on there we will add authentication. Once we add that, if I go back, I can also copy the add authorization, but I will leave that outside. Here I will return back the builder. Let me run the application, and that will not work. We did not call the extension method. We have an error here. It will be a static class. That should work, and we need to call that right here. In order to invoke that, we will say builder dot the method name add app authentication. With that, let me run the application again and see if everything is functional. Let me try to log in, access coupon. That does not work. We will log in here. Coupon should work. So perfect, that looks good. Now let me try something different. If a user is an admin user, only then they can create or delete a coupon. But if it is a customer, let's say for now they can access the coupon right here. For that, we will go back to our Coupon API and Coupon API controller. Everything is authorized, but where we have the post action method, right here, let me add something different. We are saying authorize, and we want the role of admin. Now I know we have magic string here. If you want, you can create a static detail and hold that constant. I will keep that as it is, and we will add role of admin for put, post, and delete. With that in place, let me go back, log out, and let me log in with the customer account that we created. Now if I go to coupon and try to create a new coupon, perfect, we see access denied. So our roles are also working as expected. Let me go with admin here, and I should be able to create a new coupon. Perfect, that is working. Delete is also functional. With that, you can see we have all the functionalities with authentication and authorization in our API as well as the web project. Coupon is working as expected with our project and the API. Next thing that I want to work on will be more of an assignment, because it will be exactly similar to what we did with Coupon, but that will give you hands-on practice on how everything comes together. Let me close the application here, go back to our service, and there let me create a new project, Web API project. I will call that mango.services.productAPI. We will select .NET 8 here. Let me hit the create button. Inside product API, we will be performing CRUD operation on product itself, and it will be exactly similar to what we did with Coupon. First, let me create a model for that. In the folder here, we will have models, and there we will have the product model, and inside there we will have properties for our product. I will create 6 columns in the product table. First one will be the product ID, name of the product, price, we will have the range validation there. Then we have description, category name, and image URL. Right now when we are working with image URL, we are going to use online image and not work on uploading a new image in our API. We want to focus on learning microservices for now, so I will keep things super simple. You enter a URL inside the image URL property, and that image will be displayed for that product. I will create the same properties for product DTO because when we are working with API, we do not want to expose the core model. In models here, we will create a folder with the name of DTOs, and I will make it uniform, keep that as DTO, and there I will add a new class that will be product DTO, not DTOs. Rename that to be DTO. Perfect. In there we will add the same 6 properties that we added for the product model without data annotation. That looks great. With that configured, next what I want to do is from the coupon API, edit the project file, copy all the package references, and I will add them in product API. That way we do not have to worry about adding the NuGet packages. That looks good. Finally, what I can do is copy the data folder here, paste it right here, and modify the namespace to be product API. The DB set that we want will be product here, and let me call that as products. When we are working with the product here, I want to seed some records in the product table. Rather than typing all of that based on my model, I have provided snippets in the project resources, and in section 6, we have seed product. Copy everything from there, we will paste it inside the on model creating, and perfect. You can see we have the product ID, name, price, description, image URL is a blank image with the pixel size, and that looks good. With that configured, I have the base setup that is needed for you to continue the assignment. Let me walk you through the assignment in the next video. It is time to practice the API and everything that we have learned so far. What I want you guys to create is set up the product API database and table. We created the product model and seeded the data, but we have not added connection string or created that database. So you need to create database, populate table using the apply migration in program.cs. And for that you will add the DB context, and we already have the code to seed our product table with 5 records. You will also have to set up AutoMapper in the project and perform CRUD functionality in the product API similar to what we did in Coupon API. Finally, you need to set up authentication and authorization in the product API, where create, edit and delete functionality, admin role can perform those, and read functionality, any authorized user can perform that. That is similar to what we have done with our Coupon API. Now the 5 steps that I have here will be part 1 of the assignment. Once you complete the part 1, in the next step, you have to consume the API from the web project. When you consume that API, the product API port number should be updated to port 7000, and you have to implement the product service and controller in the web project. Finally, you will have to create views for the product CRUD operation. To be uniform with the naming here, this is the naming that you have to follow. We will have a view for product create, product delete, product edit, and product index. I have also provided you snippets for the product index and product create. Product edit and product delete will be exactly similar to the product create. So good luck with the assignment, and I will show you how to do all of that step by step from the next video. But before you move on to the next video, I want you guys to pause the video and try this out. Everything that we will be doing with Product API, we have done in the Coupon API, and my main reason to have this here is for you to practice and get familiar with how the data is flowing from web project to the API project, and when you build that yourself, you will run into error message. That way you will get experience in solving those exception and error messages. So make sure that you try to complete the assignment before you move on to the solution in the next video. First thing that we will handle here is making the Product API up and running, and it is exactly similar to what we have in the Coupon API. For that, we will copy few things from Coupon API and modify the namespace. Like the extensions folder, let me copy and paste that. For the authentication, update the API here to be Product API namespace, and that looks good. Let me also copy everything from the program.cs in the Coupon API, paste that in the Product API, add the using statement for DB context here, and we need the mapping config. Let me copy and paste that in the Product API, update the namespace here to be Product API, and when we are working with the Product API, it will be product DTO to product. If you do not want to write it over, you can use .reverse map. That will do the reverse mapping as well. Perfect. Program.cs, add the using statement, and great. Let me see what else is pending. In the DTO, we need the response DTO. Let me paste that. I accidentally build. Let me copy again, paste it here. Update the namespace to be Product API. Perfect. Let me close that here. And we need the app settings. Copy that. Paste it right here. We need to update the database name to be mango_product. Then we also have to update the port number in launch settings. Which number do we want? That is 7000. Let me update that. Looks good. Final thing that we have to do is add the controller. Let me copy the Coupon API controller, paste it here, and let me remove the weather forecast. We do not need that. Open the Coupon API, rename that to be Product API. Perfect. Let me add the using statement for app.db context and response DTO, and remove the Coupon API references. We do not need that. Update the namespace to be Product API. The route here will be product. Let me fix that. And basically wherever we have coupon here, I need to replace that with product. I will only have that file open here. Press Ctrl+Shift+F. We will go to replace in file. I want to find coupon. Replace that with product, not in entire solution. Make sure again you select the current document only. Replace all. Looks good. Let me see if anything is pending here. Add the using statement. Get looks good. When we are working with product, we do not have get by code. Let me delete that. Perfect. We have the DTO, product, and I believe that looks great. Let me do a Ctrl+F here and see if we have coupon. We do not. That looks good. With that configured, let me remove the authorize keyword for now. And where we have the authorize by role, let me remove that. I want to see if everything is functional. I do not want that project. Let me stop here. Set the startup project. Not that. I want the individual, so let me select and set that as a startup project and run the product API. We have few errors here. Let me see. Remove that and run again. We have the globalization invariant error, and we will go to the project file for that. We will remove this here, and then we need to add migration. We will go to Tools Package Manager here. Default project should be Product API. Add migration. Add product and seed table. It should create the product table and it should also insert data. That looks good. All we have to do is run the application. Apply migration will already be taken care of from the program.cs file. Let me execute here and perfect. We have all the product here. That looks good. Let me try to create a new product here and see if that works. Execute that. And perfect, success is true. Let me try to get all again. And we have that product as well. If I try to delete that, let me see. ID is 5. Try that. And we get the success. If I try to retrieve all, perfect. Product ID 5 got deleted. So our product API is looking great and that is perfect. What we can do is if I go back here, inside the product controller, let me bring back the authorize that we have. Perfect. And with that, we need to work on the web project to call our product API. Next part of the assignment is to consume our API from the web project. First, we have to add the service similar to the iCoupon service. Copy and paste that here. This will be iProduct service. Let me copy that name, replace it where we have coupon. I will have to replace that with product. Where we have the coupon DTO, it will be product DTO. And we have to add those DTOs as well. We will go to the product API. In models, we have that DTO. Copy and paste it right here. Make sure and again make sure to change the namespace. Perfect. That looks good. Let me replace here to be product DTO. And perfect. Interface is looking good. Let me copy the coupon service, paste that here, and rename that to be product service. Then inside the product service, we will do Ctrl+Shift+F, replace in file. We will replace coupon with the product, all lowercase, and we do not want in the current project, only in the current document. Make sure to select that or else you will mess up everything else. Once that is done, let me do the uppercase coupon with the uppercase product. Replace all. Perfect, that looks good. I need to create the product API base. Let me do that in static detail. Copy this, paste it here. And copy that name, product API base. Then let me go to the app settings. We will have to add that URL here. That will be product API. The port number is 7000. We will add that and configure program.cs with the new URL for the product API base. That is product API. We will have to add the HTTP client here. for the I product service. Implementation is in product service. We will also have to add the scoped implementation. So I product service and product service. That looks good for all the changes inside program.cs file. Let me examine the product service. API product, that URL is valid, and this looks good. Let me close all the tabs here. Our service is looking good. Before we add the view or anything else, let me create a controller. We can copy the coupon controller, paste that here, rename that to be product controller. Let me update all of that here as well. Replace in file. We will replace coupon with product, all lowercase, in the current document. Let me see, this is not coming up here. Close that and let me open that once again. For some reason, you can see the find and replace is not working for me. Let me manually update that. Product controller. We will have to go with the hard route of updating that manually. Call that as product service, and it will be I product service. Copy that here, product service, and let me add that in dependency injection. Then let me copy this product service and replace that in all the places. Rather than coupon here, it will be product. Copy that. I will try to replace where I can. I am using the capital case. So let me update all of that. Perfect, we update this. It will be product DTO. Let me replace that in all the places here. Perfect, that looks good. Let me see what else we have. We have the get all products async. Deserialize that, looks good. Product create looks good. This will be product index. Perfect, we will display product created successfully. Copy that. We will rename that to be product DTO. Copy and paste that here. We have product ID inside there. Perfect. And product DTO. Let me do Control F and try to find coupon here. We have product ID, replace that. And we have product deleted successfully. Add that here. And perfect. We do not have any more instance. Product controller is also looking great. Let me add a debugging point here to see if the response actually works. In order to see everything in action, in views, we have to create the product index. Let me add that view here. Will be product index. Now the view here, I have provided that in the snippet. So let me go there. We have the product index. Copy that, paste it here. We need the model here. That will be IEnumerable of the product DTO. If you scroll down here, where we have the tBody, we need to add a for each loop for all the item in our model. Close that right here. We need to display the name that is inside item.name. Category name will be inside item.category name. Then for the price, we have item.price. Convert that to a currency format. Where we have the pencil icon, we want to add the ASP action. That will be product edit. And when we are editing, we want to pass the product ID. So we will say product ID is equal to, and that is inside item.product ID. Perfect. Then we have the delete here. The action for that will be product delete. ASP route, we will pass the product ID again. And that will be item.product ID. That looks good. Final change that I want to do is inside underscore layout. We need to add one more link here. Content management. Copy the ally element here. Paste that one more time for product. It will be product index action, and perfect. I believe everything looks good with that. Configure the startup project, and we will start all the project. Let me see what we have accomplished so far. Let me log in here as an admin, and we click on product. We go to product index, press F10, response. Perfect, we got the response back. Let me go back to the view, and great. Our product list is coming up, and that is great news. In the next video, let me work on the remaining functionalities. We are able to display all the product. If we log out here and try product, you will notice that will not work. We get the unauthorized. So our authorization is also functional here. Let me log in back here, and we want to perform the other CRUD operations on product. Now I have provided the product create here. You can copy that, or you can use create from coupon here and modify the property names. Let me do that with the coupon. I believe that might be simpler. Where we have the views, let me first create all the views. Add view. We want the product create. Go back here, copy product delete, add view. And then in the product controller, similar to product delete, we will be adding the edit functionality as well. Let me copy the product edit, paste that here, rename that to be product edit here. When we edit, we will receive the product ID, and I believe this looks good for the edit as well. But when we are editing, we want to call the update product async, and we will pass the complete product DTO. That is successful. We will say product updated successfully, else we have the error message. Let me copy the name here, add view, add product edit view. Finally, we want to create all the views here. Let me copy the coupon, create view here, copy that, paste that inside, which is this one. Let me see. It is product delete. We want product create, paste that here, and this will be on the product DTO. Action will be product create. Let me copy the product here, create product. There we will have name of the product, add that here. Then we have the category name, copy and paste that here. After that we have the description, copy and paste that. Scroll down. Let me copy and paste this 2 more times. We have the image URL and we have the price. I believe, yep, price. Let me do that right here. Perfect, that looks good. This will be product index. And great, that looks good. Copy the product create, paste that for product edit, update that to be edit product. Everything else will remain the same. Yep, that looks good. Here it will be product edit. And we have the product delete. Let me paste that here. When we are deleting, everything will be disabled. Let me add that. And we will remove the validation. We do not need them. One thing that I forgot is for description. This will be a text area. We need the closing tag here, and we will add rows. Let's say 5 row. Let me copy this, paste that for the other description, remove the disabled, and perfect. Let me save this and run the application. Now I am going super quick with the product here because we have already done that for our coupon. Let me go, and when I create a product, nothing happens. Let me see what link I have in the product index. I forgot the ASP action. That will be product create. Change that, and perfect. Let me try to create a product here. That works. Let me try to edit that. When we try to edit, you can see it is rather creating a new product. So something is not valid there. We will go back to the product, and the reason behind that is we do not have the hidden property for the ID. Let me try that. Let me add the product ID as the hidden property here and try that once again. We will change that to be 2. That works. So that was the root cause, because we did not have the hidden property when we were posting the form. It was setting the product ID to be 0. Because of that, entity framework created a new record. Let me see delete here, and in delete we forgot to change. Let me go back. This is create. Let me open delete here, and it will be product delete. Delete product, and btn, let me change that to be danger. Value will be delete. Perfect. Save that. Let me hit delete, and we get the error. It does not delete the record. Let me see why that is. In the product controller, let me close all the tab here. It gets confusing super quick. Where we have the delete, HTTP post, add the debugging point, and try that. It hits my breakpoint here, and I do not have the product ID. That is why it was failing. Let me open the view again, product delete, and similar to product edit, we will require the hidden property. Save that. Let me continue here. Go back. Try to delete that. We should have the ID. That looks good. And perfect. Product has been deleted successfully. With that, all the CRUD operations are working as expected. If we log in as a customer here, you will notice we will not be able to create a product. Perfect. Access denied. So all of our validations and product API is working as expected. We have about 3 services and we are consuming them in our web project. What I want to do next is on the home page, let me display all the products. And for that we will have to modify the home controller. Let me close all the tabs here. I will open the home controller and product controller. In product index we are getting all the products. That is exactly what we want in our home controller index view right here. We need to inject the product service. Let me go to the product controller and copy this. Paste it right here. We do not need the logger. And modify the controller name. Action here, we will have to make that async task of iAction result. With that, we should be able to retrieve all the product here. Let me run the application and see if that works. If I examine the list here, we have 0. Something is not right here. Let me continue. And of course we have unauthorized. For now what I will do is when we go to product controller, well, we will have to go to API controller here. Remove the authorized tag. We want get to be accessible. Post, put and delete. We have authorized with the admin role. That looks good. Let me go back to the application and refresh the page. Hot reload will kick in. But I forgot to add the debugging point here. Let me do that again. And now we have list with the 4 product. That looks great. Our controller action method is looking good. Let me add the index view. It will be an empty view. And actually I think we already have that view. Let me right click, go to the view. We have the home page here. Let me design this in the next video. We want to display all the product on the home page of the application rather than typing the HTML and CSS. Inside the snippets folder, we are in section 7. We have the home page UI. Copy the HTML and CSS. Paste it right here. Let me create a model here. If we go to home controller, we are passing a list of product DTO. You can have a list here or an IEnumerable for the product DTO. With that configured, let me run the application and see what is the default UI that we added. Perfect. If you examine the landing page here, we have 1 product. We will have to add a for each loop and modify that. Now here I have column 4. Let me make that column 12. If it is medium, let me make it column MD6. For large, we will give it 4. You can see that looks much better. Now let me add a for each loop here and we will iterate through our product. I will add the for each right here. For each variable product in model. The M will be capital here and let me close that right here. We need to display name here. That will be product.name. Then we have the product image. That will be inside product.image URL. We have the price here. I will convert product.price to the currency format. Category name will be inside product.category name and description will have some HTML content. So right here, let me say html.raw and I will pass product.description. Where we have the details here, we need to add ASP action. Let me call that details action. And when we click on the details button, we need the product ID. That will be inside ASP route. Let me call that product ID is equal to. That will be inside product.product ID. I believe that looks good. Let me align all of that. And perfect. Let's go back to the home page here. Perfect. We have all the products that are being displayed right here. Our home page is looking great with all the products. Now on the details page, we want to display individual product. If I go back to the controller here, rather than retrieving all the products, now I only want to retrieve certain product. Let me copy this, paste it one more time here, and that will be details page. Inside here we are passing the product ID. That name must match what we have in the ASP route, that is product ID. And perfect, that looks good. Based on that, we do not want to retrieve all the product. We want to get product by ID and pass the product ID here. The result that we will get back will not be a list. That will be a single product DTO. Perfect. And this we will modify to be a product DTO. Call that as model. Copy and paste that here. And perfect. That looks good for the details action method. On top of that, I want to add the authorize keyword here. That way, only if a user is logged in, only then they will be able to view the details page. The action method for details is looking perfect. But rather than details here, let me rename that to be product details. Copy that name, add that view, select the empty view, and paste that name, add that. We will also have to modify in index here where we have the details. The action name is product details now. For the UI of the product details, I will go back to the snippet, and there we have details.ui. Let me copy everything, paste it here, scroll to the top here. We need to define the model. That will be product DTO. Before we do anything here, let me run the application and see the UI. Perfect. Let me log in here. We have the authorize keyword there. And let me go to details. Perfect. Let me replace everything with the dynamic content from the product DTO. Name here will be model.name. Next we have the price. And for that we will convert to currency format. Scroll down, we have the image URL. Let me replace that. We have model.image URL for that. For category name in the template itself, I had model.category_name, so we can leave that as it is. Where we have the description, we will have to convert that html.raw, and we will display model.description. That looks good. Back to list here, we will go back to the index action. Let me define that here. And let me save everything. Go back to the project. Perfect. We have the text, price, description, appetizer. Back to list is also functional. And image is also being displayed. On the details page, we have an input field. There we want to populate the number of product that we want to add to the shopping cart. But if we examine the product DTO that we have, we do not have anything to store that count. If you want, you can add that to the product DTO because we are not adding that to the actual model in the database. This is only DTO for the web project. Right here, let me create a variable with the name of count and set the default value to be 1. Going back to the view here, scroll down, we have the input field. We can add ASP4, that is for count. Whoops, that will be count here. Perfect. And then we should add validation. If I go back here, I can use the range data annotation to make sure that it is 1 to 100. Inside the view, we will add the span with validation, and at the end here we will have to add a section for script, include the validation scripts partial. Let me save everything here, and we will have to restart the application. Let me try to go to details here. We will have to log in. And then when we are logging in, we can always redirect them back to the original URL. But perfect. The count here is looking great. When we hit the Add to Cart button, we want to add the product to shopping cart. Now shopping cart can be of two types. One, you can store a local session where you can hold the shopping cart, and the other route is to store a shopping cart in the database. The advantages of storing shopping cart in the database is based on what a user has in the shopping cart. We can send them promotional email and have many more functionalities. You might have seen when you are shopping and you leave something in the cart, couple of days down the road, you will get a notification in your email with something like you forgot to check out, and we can add all of those promotional logic as long as we are storing the shopping cart in the database. And for that, we will have to create a new API for our shopping cart. Let me do that from the next video. We need to create a new project for shopping cart API. In the services, I will add a new project. That will be ASP.NET Core Web API project. Call that to be mango.services.shoppingcart.api. Default configuration looks good here. Let me create the project. Before I continue here, let me copy the project file from product API, copy the packages, paste them in the shopping cart API. That way we do not have to spend time in adding the NuGet packages. Perfect. So our new API project has been added to work with shopping cart. Before we configure the DB context, we need to create the tables to maintain shopping cart. Now when it comes to shopping cart, there are two things, or rather two tables that we have to configure. First will be a shopping cart header, and next will be a shopping cart details. Header table will contain information like what is the user ID, what is the coupon code, what is the cart total, and if any coupon code is applied, what is the discount. The details on the other page will contain list of all the products that are added for that user in the shopping cart and what is the count of that product. In the project here, let me create a new folder for models, and I will create two class files. We will have the cart header and we will have the cart details. Looks good. Let me add that, and first let me work on the cart header. We need the primary key of the table, and that will be integer cart header ID. For one user, there will always be only one record inside the cart header ID, and for that we will also store the user ID. That way we know it is unique. Then a user might apply coupon on the shopping cart. Let me store the coupon code here, and if a coupon code is applied, we will also have some discount. We need to store the grand total. Let me do that here, cart total. Now discount and cart total, we do not want to store them in the database. We only want them for display purpose. Like when we are retrieving a shopping cart, we will dynamically calculate them based on the shopping cart and cart detail. So right now, let me not add both of these fields to the database. I will add the not mapped for both of them. After that, we need the cart detail here, and there we will have a primary key that will be cart details ID. It will be a primary key. Let me add the data annotation, and we need the foreign key here for cart header ID. I will add the navigation property there for cart header. Now inside shopping cart detail, we need to know what is the product ID, store that here, and then we will have to populate the product details somehow by calling the product API. I will do prop here. We need to add product DTO. If you do control dot here, it will tempt you to add reference to the project. But do not do that. All of the microservices project will be isolated. So rather we will copy the product model, product DTO, and let me close this here, paste that in the models folder, rename the namespace here to be shopping cart API. Perfect. And that will be inside DTO folder. Let me create that and move the product DTO. Let me see the namespace. That looks good. Now we can press Ctrl dot here and add the using statement that will be inside the same project. Product DTO property, let me call that as product, and I will add not mapped. We do not want to add that to our database. We have product, we have cart header, and finally we want count of the product. Right here we will have count. That way we will track how many quantity a user wants for a certain product in our cart detail. And with that, the header and detail are looking great. Based on the model here, we will also have to add DTO because when we are working with API, we will not expose the root model. We will only expose DTO. Let me add a new class here for cart, details DTO, and cart header DTO. Let me copy the property from cart header here, paste them in the cart header DTO. We do not need the not mapped there or the data annotation. Go to the cart detail here, copy this. I have a spelling mistake, it will be DTO. Rename that. We will remove the data annotation. Cart header will be cart header DTO, which can be null here. Product ID, product DTO, let me add the null as well, and we have the count. We have added a few DTOs right here, but I will add one more DTO that will basically have the shopping cart. Let me call that cart DTO, and inside there we will have one cart header and a list of cart details. Basically, when we want to retrieve a shopping cart for a user, that will have one cart header and it can have multiple cart details. That will be the DTO that we will pass when we are working with the complete shopping cart. And finally, if you examine the cart header, we are also working with coupon code. Let me get that DTO, coupon DTO, and I will also copy the response DTO that will be generic for all the API, paste them here, modify the namespace here to be shopping cart API, and we will modify the coupon as well. Perfect. With that, I believe we have added all the DTOs that will be needed for shopping cart, but if some new requirement comes in, we can always come back here and modify the details. Let me save everything and close all the tabs here. Now let me do the default configuration that we do for all the APIs. Remove the weather forecast, that is not needed. Let me open product API here for reference. I will copy the program.cs, paste it for the shopping cart here, save all of that, copy the data and extension folder, paste them here, modify the namespace for both the files. It will be shopping cart API, copy that, appdb context, shopping cart API. DB set will be cart header and cart details. Let me create those tables. Copy and paste that again for cart detail. Perfect. We do not need anything on the override for shopping cart. I can remove this method if I want as well. That looks good. Let me go to the extension here. Authentication looks good. Save that. Then let me copy the mapping config, paste it inside shopping cart here. Modify the namespace to be shopping cart API. Rather than product here, I will add the cart header and cart details. Mapping config looks good. Let me close that. Actually, let me edit that. I need to remove this globalization, or else I will get the error later on. Then let me copy the app settings with the connection string as well as API settings. Paste that here. Database name will be mango underscore shopping cart. That looks good. And with that, I believe the basic configuration is done for the shopping cart API. Let me go to program.cs and add the using statement. Remove the product API from there. Perfect. Looks good. Let me add the using statement again. And great. Last thing that we have to do is add a migration. Package manager console here. Default project, shopping cart, add migration, add shopping cart tables. Perfect, we are adding the cart header and cart details. Let me run the project shopping cart API, and that will apply the migrations automatically. Perfect, the project is running here. Let me go to SQL Server, where we have Mango, we have the Mango shopping cart, database. Perfect. We have the cart headers and the cart details. And great. Both the tables are looking good, and we can continue from the next video. We need to work on creating the controller or endpoints in the shopping cart API. Let me create a controller for that. Make sure to select the API controller here, and I will call that shopping cart API controller. We need to update the route here. Let me call that API/cart. We have the API controller. Now think about what will be all the services that we will require to inject here. Right now we will require AutoMapper because we will working with DTO, and then when we have to add items to the shopping cart database, we will require DB context. Our API will also return the response DTO, so let me add that as well. But rather than shopping cart API, let me call that cart API. That should be sufficient. With that change, let me add the response DTO, AutoMapper, and AppDB context using dependency injection. We want to work on the main action method. I will call that absurd, because no matter if we are adding a new item to the shopping cart or we are updating existing item, we will take care of all of that in one single endpoint. The model that we will receive here is a cart DTO. Let me add that. We will make that an async method, and the response that we will return back here will be response DTO. Perfect, that looks good. I can remove the action result. Perfect. That looks good for the endpoint. And the absurd action method, we will make that HTTP post because we need to retrieve the cart DTO from body. I can rename the action method or the endpoint to be cart absurd, and that looks good. We need to work on one endpoint that will be responsible for creating new shopping cart entities or updating any of the existing shopping cart entries. Let me walk you through the logic that I want in this action method. Initial example will be when a user adds an item for the first time in their shopping cart. Right now they do not have any items in the shopping cart and they add one item. At that point there will not be an entry inside the cart header or the cart detail. We will first have to create an entry inside cart header and then we will have to create the cart details for the item that user is adding to the shopping cart. Next scenario will be if a user adds a new item to the shopping cart, but they already have some other items that are added to the shopping cart. In that case, there will be an entry in the cart header table. We need to find that entry, retrieve the header ID, and using that header ID, we have to create a new entry in the cart detail. Final scenario will be if a user updates quantity of an existing item in the shopping cart. In that case, we have to find out the cart details and we have to update count in cart details. We will have to implement all three of these functionality in the cart upsert endpoint. Let me do that in a try-catch block. That way, if we get any exception, we can set the response.message is equal to exception.message.toString and _response.isSuccess will be false. Now initially what we have to do is we need to find if an entry exists in the cart header for that user ID. In the try block, we will access _db.cartheaders.first.default async and we will retrieve that based on the user ID. So if user ID is equal to cart header dot user ID, then we retrieve that cart header. If that is null, that means we have to create the cart header and details. But if that is not null, that means that there is an entry in cart header for that user. Then we have to check if the cart details has the same product or not. Let me add that check first. We will say variable cart details from db is equal to await _db dot cart details dot, we have the first.default async, and we will check based on the product ID is equal to cart dto dot cart details dot first dot product ID. Now the reason I am using first here is because cart detail will only have one entry, because the only way to add an item to a shopping cart is from the details page of a product. So it will not be possible that they will add two products at the same time. So we can check the product ID here, and on top of that we need to make sure that that entry is only for the user that we are working with, because it is possible that a different cart header ID might have the same product in their shopping cart. We do not want to retrieve that. So I can say u.cartHeaderID is equal to cart header from db.cartHeaderID. That way we will find out if the same user has that same product in the shopping cart or not. If they do not have that, so if cart details from db is null, that means that we have to create a new entry for cart details. But in the else here, they already have that product in the shopping cart, so we have to update count in cart details. The if-else logic that we have here covers everything that we have discussed in the PowerPoint right here. So that way we have the skeleton laid out. Now we need to work on creating or updating our tables. Let me work on one thing at a time here. First one that we have, we need to create the header and detail. We need to convert from DTO to the model object. I can say cart header here, and let me call that cart header is equal to _mapper.map, and we will map the cart header DTO dot cart header. Once we do that, we will say underscore db dot cart headers dot add that to the database here, and we need to save the changes. Now the reason I am saving changes here is because I want to retrieve the header ID, and that header ID I want to populate to the cart detail. So cartDTO dot cart details dot first, and I will populate the cart header ID. That will be cart header dot cart header ID. Header ID will be populated here because we are saving changes on this object. Now that we have the cart detail, we can save that to the database underscore db dot cart details dot add. Again, we have to use the mapper here to convert that to cart detail entity. Cart detail here, and we will pass the cart DTO dot cart details dot first. After we add that, we can say await underscore db dot save changes asynchronous. I can use the async method here as well. Let me do that. Perfect. That looks good for the initial scenario that we have. We have the initial scenario that is covered here, where we have to create the cart header and cart detail. If we scroll down here, we need to create cart details when a cart header already exists and if they are adding a new product to the shopping cart. For that, I can copy the lines here and let me paste them. We need to populate the cart header ID, and that is inside cart header from db dot cart header ID. Once we populate the cart detail, we can add that to the database and save changes. In the final section here, we have to update the count. We can say cart DTO dot cart details dot first dot count plus equal to cart details from db dot count. On top of that, we can also assign the cart details ID and the cart header ID. Perfect. That looks good. Finally, rather than add, we will be using update, but I can copy and paste that. I will rename add to be update. That looks good. We will await underscore db dot save changes. After all of that here, we will say underscore response dot result that is equal to the new cart DTO. That looks good. We have error and we are not returning. After we catch the exception, we will return the response back. Perfect. That looks good for the cart upsert method, but before we do anything, we need to validate if this is functional. We have the startup project as the shopping cart API. Let me run that and see if that works. You will see something weird, but let me walk you through all of that. Here we have cart header, we have cart details, and we have the product details as well. We do not care about the product details. Let me remove all of that. Then in cart details, we have cart header. That is also not needed. The model that we care about is right here. If you want to modify the DTO to be like this, you can do that, but I'm going to keep things as it is for now. Let me paste the model here. That way we can reuse. User ID, let me add something temporary right now. It is a fake user ID, that is okay. Coupon code, I will empty that. Cart total, let me change that to be 100. Cart details ID will be 0, cart header ID will be 0. We are adding product ID 3 and count of 33. Let me execute that. We scroll down and perfect, it is successful. Let me go to the database here. If I execute that, we have the cart header ID, user ID. Let me copy the details here as well. And perfect. Count is 33. Product ID is 3. If I go back here and let's say I want to modify the same cart header ID of 1, cart total, we don't care about that. But when we are modifying that, let me say product ID 3, I want to add 3 more count. Execute that here and we will see an exception. Perfect. You can see the instance of entity type cart details cannot be tracked because another instance with the same value of cart details ID is already being tracked. This is a typical error message that you encounter with Entity Framework Core when you are updating an entity that is already being tracked by some other request. And what I mean by that is if we go up here, we are retrieving the cart header and we are retrieving the cart details. When we retrieve a particular cart details, it is already tracking this cart details from DB. But then what we do is when we are updating few things here, we are updating the cart DTO and we are passing that right here. Entity Framework Core will get confused because that same ID it is already tracking right here. That is why we see that exception. To solve that error message, when we are retrieving the shopping cart here, we do not want to update the cart details from DB directly. We are updating the cart DTO and not the object that we retrieve here, and because of that we can tell Entity Framework that the object that we are retrieving here, I do not want you to track that, and we will set it as no tracking. That will make sure that the object is not tracked here, and we will not see the error with multiple tracking. We can also add the same as no tracking when we are retrieving the cart header right here. With that configured, let me restart the application. We will try to post here and let me copy our model, paste that here. Header ID is 1, user ID. Let me go and copy that, paste it here. We don't care about the code. Header ID is 1, product ID 3. We want to update the count by 3. Right now we have 33. If I execute it here, we get a weird exception. Let me see what that is. Add a debugging point here, execute, and let me see. It is retrieving the cart details from DB. That looks good. Let me examine the cart detail here. That is also looking good. Save changes. When we save the change, we have an issue with the header ID. Did I type that incorrectly? Let me see. The cart header ID should be 1. How come it is 3? Let me execute and debug that once again. Let me make sure that is 1. And let me see the DTO. For some reason, it is passing the cart header ID as 2. And that is my mistake. I added that. You can see it should be 1. Let me replace and try to execute that and see what happens. Verify the cart details here. And it is 2. Whoops, I just noticed here it should be equal to and not plus equal to. Plus equal to will only apply for the count. With that configured, let me try that once again. Copy and paste it here. Cart header ID will be 1, product 3, count 3. And let me get the user ID from database. Perfect. Let me execute here. It should work now. Perfect. It is successful. Let me go to the database here, and the count should now be 36. And that is perfect. If I go back to the API, and if I modify the count to be, let's say, -3, it will be back to 33. Let me go to database. Perfect. Now let me try to add a new product for this user. Product ID, let me change that to be 2. I want 5 count. Add that here. And great, it adds another entry in the cart details. Now if I modify the user ID here, and we will not pass any cart header ID, execute that. Let me see what happens. Perfect. It adds for the cart header ID 2, the product 2, and count of 5. With that, we have covered all the scenario to add items to the shopping cart. Before I wrap up, let me go back, and even if I added a cart header ID of let's say 1 here, and if we execute that, if you scroll down here, you will notice here that it was successful, but we had an invalid cart header ID because that user ID is actually cart header ID 2. In that case, let me do select top 1000 here. Let me get the header as well here, and perfect. You can see it actually went by the user ID and not the cart header ID. Based on the user ID, it updated the count here to be 10. That logic is good for now. If for some reason based on your business requirement you want to add more validation, you are more than welcome to modify the API that we are building. But what we have is working as expected based on my requirements. Now I want to add another endpoint to our API to remove any cart detail. Let me go back to Visual Studio here, and I can copy the upsert, paste that one more time, and let me remove everything that we have right here. Perfect. Modify the action name here to be remove cart, and when we are removing, we will be receiving an integer that will be the cart details ID, and we will get that from body. I will be explicit about that. We do not want to get that from the URL. Method name here will be remove cart, and for that we will retrieve the cart details from the database. Next, I want to check total count of cart items, because we are removing a cart items from the detail, and if that is the only item in the shopping cart for that user, then we can remove the cart header as well. I will check _db.cartDetails.where u goes to u.cartHeaderID is equal to cartDetails.cartHeaderID. Once we get that, we need to retrieve the count from there, and then we can check if total count is 1. That means that it is the last item that user is removing from the shopping cart. In that case, rather than removing the cart details, we can retrieve the cart header from the database, and _db.cartHeaders.remove, we can remove the cart header. But before we remove that, right here, I can go to cart detail, and I can remove the cart details. Perfect. So we will remove cart details, and if that was the last item, then we will remove the cart header as well. We will say await _db.saveChanges asynchronous, and the result here, we can set that to be a Boolean flag as true. That looks good for the remove functionality. Let me see that in action. I will go to the database. Let me open that up. And this cart detail is the only record for the user that we have. So if I remove cart detail ID 3, it should remove the detail and header. Let me see that. We have removed cart. I will pass 3 there. That is done here. Let me execute. Perfect. It removed the cart detail as well as the cart header. Now we want to work on the final endpoint in the shopping cart API that is to retrieve shopping cart for a user. We will go back to the project here and let me copy one of the method. Well, rather than copying, let me create that from scratch. That will be the first one here. Paste the definition. And what will be the name? That will be getCart, and there we will be passing user ID. It will not be an HTTP post. That will be a getAction method. Call that as getCart here. We will pass the user ID. That is a GUID. I will add the try-catch block there. In exception, we will set the success to be false and return back the response at the end. Right here, we want to retrieve a cart DTO. Let me call that as cart is equal to new. And first, we want to populate the cart header. Cart header, when we retrieve that from database, we need to convert that to cart header DTO. That should be the return type. Now we need to retrieve that from database, so _db.cartheaders.first u goes to u.userid is equal to the user ID. That will retrieve the cart header, and then we can populate cart details. Again, we will have to map that, but it will be an IEnumerable of the cart details DTO. We need to retrieve that from database _db.cartDetails.where u goes to u.cartHeaderID is equal to cart.cartHeader.the_cart_header_id. Let me break that down in different line. That way it is easier to read. Perfect. With that, we are retrieving the shopping cart. But in shopping cart header, we have a property that is cart total. We can populate that with a for each loop. I will say for each variable item in cart.cartDetails, we want to populate the cart total by multiplying the count by price and then adding that for all the products. Finally, we will return response.result is equal to the cart that we populated. That looks good. Let me save this and go back to the endpoint. Hot reload does not kick in. Let me restart the application. Perfect. Let me go back to the database and retrieve the user ID here. Try that out. And of course, we will get the exception object reference not set to instance of an object because product is not populated. We do not even have product in the same API. Somehow from the shopping cart API, we need to call the product API to load the product details for the product in our shopping cart. Let me do that from the next video. We have been working with APIs for a while, but now is the first time when we will see how microservices communicate with each other. The scenario that we want to discuss right now is when we are loading the shopping cart, we need to retrieve product details. For that, we need to work on the link or the connection that you see on the screen, where our shopping cart will be interacting with the product API. And for that, we will have to set up HTTP client request in our shopping cart. That way we are able to make HTTP calls to our product API. Now we need to retrieve all the product in our shopping cart API. Let me go back to the project here, and where we have the shopping cart API, we will be adding a folder for service. In that folder, let me create one more folder for iService. Whoops, there we go. And the interface, let me add that new item. I will call that iProductService, and that will be responsible to load all the product from the product API. It will return an IEnumerable of product DTO. Let me add that using statement. Before I start consuming or writing this service, we need to add the URL of the product API. Inside the app settings, I will create a new section, service URLs, and we will add the product API, that is localhost 7000. Let me double check that from the web project. Yep, that looks good. With that configured, now we need to add an HTTP client for this particular URL. We have seen how to use the client factory. Let me show you the other way around here. In program.cs, we will say builder.services.add HTTP client. In there, I will give it a name of product, and we need to define the URL. We will set that by u goes to u.base address is equal to new URI. We need to create that. And the URL is inside builder.configuration. We need the key name. Let me go back. Service URLs, add a colon there, and it is product API. Let me paste that. That will add an HTTP client for product with the base URL right here. And when we have the HTTP client set here, we can implement our service. Call that product service. That will implement the iProduct service interface. And let me implement that interface. In order to make the HTTP call, we will inject the iHTTP client factory. Let me see how this service is different from what we have in the web project. We have the product service. There we were using the base service and we were directly using the send async. If I open base service, you can notice we were creating a client with one particular name. We have already defined that as product. So let me close the web project here, and right here we will create a client that will be _http client factory.create client, but the name here will be product. Based on the name here, it will examine in program.cs and it will get the base address. And if I go back here on client, I can call the method getAsync and I can provide the route right here. I need to add the async keyword, and perfect, we will get the response back. Once we get the response, we will retrieve the API content from there, and then finally I will get the response back by deserializing JSON convert. We will have to add the NuGet package for that. .deserialize object. The response type will always be response DTO. We are uniform, and we will pass the API content. Finally, if the response is successful, in that case we will deserialize that again to an IEnumerable of product DTO. So we will return JSON convert dot, we have the deserialize object. I will deserialize that to an IEnumerable of product DTO, and before we deserialize that, we have to convert to string. Let me do that. The response dot result. That looks good. But if the response was not successful, we can return a new list of product DTO. With that, the endpoint is looking good, but in program.cs, we have to configure our service. Right here, I will add builder.services.add-scoped iProduct service. Implementation is inside product service. And finally, in our cart API controller right here, we need to inject the product service. Let me do that here, iProduct service, and inject that. After we retrieve the cart details here, let me load all the product in product DTO. by calling the product service. When we are iterating through the cart detail, I can also populate item.product is equal to product DTOs dot first dot default u goes to u dot product ID is equal to item dot product ID. Now the product ID has to be valid. When we were adding things in the table here, I used the product ID of 2 and 3. If this was some other ID like 10, it will not work. Because in the table here you can see products. We have the ID 124 that we seeded. Because of that, what we have right now will work. With that configured, let me run the application. Well, it will not work again because we are only running the shopping cart API. Let me run all the project. Configure startup project here and multiple startup project. Let me start that and let me see. When I run the application, I see an exception. Port 7001 is in use. I might have accidentally configured to API to use 7001. That is supposed to be used for coupon. So let me go back to the application. And which one is this? It is coupon API. That is good. Let me stop here. Configure the startup project. And let me examine the shopping cart API, what I have for that. Whoops, I used 7001. Let me go back to the document. That should be 7003. Perfect. Let me run it again and see what happens. We see the error again with 7001. I thought I fixed that here. Let me save that, clean the solution, and try that once again. And perfect, it works this time. Let me open the shopping cart API. I will try the get. We will go to our database, copy the user ID, paste it here, and let me see. Great, you can see it retrieves the header. We have the total based on the product and count, and it also retrieves the product as well. That is looking much better. With that, the get endpoint is working as expected, but now we are able to go to the product API. But now we are able to call product API from the shopping cart API. In our cart API controller, inside the shopping cart project, we want to add 2 more endpoints. Where we have the cart absurd, let me paste 1 more endpoint, that is apply coupon. Right here, I am not doing anything. I am expecting a cart DTO from body, and the method name is apply coupon. We have a basic try catch block. When a user clicks the apply coupon, we want to retrieve the cart from database. So cart from db _db dot cart headers dot first, and there we will say u goes to u dot user ID is equal to cart DTO dot cart header dot user ID. I will update the cart from db dot coupon code is equal to cart DTO dot cart header dot coupon code and _db dot cart headers dot update. We will pass the cart from db, and finally _db dot save changes. We are in the async method. We can use the async methods here, and we can do the same here as well if you want.